Welcome guys, today we're revisiting the Hager A380 in the latest version of X-Plane 11 in 2021. It's been a long time since I've flown this, so we'll jump straight in and we'll try and do a full flight. So we'll turn the batteries on and then the external power. We'll switch on the APU master and start the APU. Once that's available, we can turn on the APU bleed. We'll also switch on the anti-ice and some lights. We're going to set our squawk. And we can start inputting our flight plan. So we press route select, it opens up a Windows dialog, which I can't record. You select your FMS file and you set the cruising altitude here. So we're going to match the plan, 24,000 feet. Cost index looks good. The ILS we'll set a little bit later on. We'll go to performance. We'll set our V speeds. So these I just use like magic numbers, but you can use a weight and balance calculator if you want. I can't really be bothered. This thing is pretty old, fairly broken, and this works just fine. So we'll also set our flex again to the magic number, which seems to work, of 53 degrees. And the takeoff flaps will be 2. I'm going to set our transition altitude here of 5,000 feet. And we'll do the same on the descent page. On our approach page, we'll set our radio minimums of 150 feet-ish. And the go around page, again, we'll set these numbers, which someone told me to do one day, but we never go around anyway, so whatever, it's fine. And we'll set the transition altitude on the go around page to 5,000 feet also. We're just going to clean up the ND here. Okay, with the ND set up, you can see our flight plan there on the ND itself. That will need a little adjustment later on, but we'll look at that soon. So we'll go up here, we'll do engine ignition. You can literally start all 4 at the same time. I just like to start them in this order because it's what you're meant to do. And on the ECAM here in the middle, you'll see the numbers start to increase as the engines fire up. And as they spool up, we'll take a look outside. So the engines are spooling up, and very soon we're going to have 4 good starts. And we'll know they're good starts because on the ECAM page, you will see the available label over all 4 engines, which we can hear. So with that done, we can go back up to the top panel. We can switch the ignition off, and we can go over to engine bleed, turn off the APU bleed, and turn off the APU, make sure the packs are on. We'll check our cruising altitude, flight director. We're going to set our speed to managed here, make sure heading is managed also, which it is. With that done, auto brake to RTO, spoilers to armed. With takeoff flaps set, we are pretty much good to go. So we'll spool up the engines to flex. Take the parking brake off and begin our takeoff roll. As soon as we're off the ground, the landing gear comes up, we switch the autopilot on, and we can start rolling those flaps off also. You can see here that it's turning to follow the plan, but again that will need a little bit of adjustment in a minute, which we're going to look at. So with the flaps now completely up, it will ask us to put the throttles to climb. So with the throttles in the climb position, we're going to take a closer look at that flight plan. So because it's old and broken and it's an old navigation system, just make sure the auto brake's set here, but because it's an old navigation system, it does all kinds of weird things with your waypoints. So it's set our first waypoint in the SID to somewhere 500 miles away. So we'll need to fix that. So we're going to do a direct to in the FMC, but at least it's holding speed well below 10,000. Okay, so we're going to go down to the FMC, go to the direct to, and we'll set the end point of our SID, and we'll go direct to that just to make sure we start flying in the right direction. And you can see here it turns round and it starts heading towards the path that's set on our plan. And now we're nicely on track. Obviously we've set our altimeter to standard above 5,000 feet, and you can also see that above 10,000 feet it has accelerated to the correct cruising speed. The rest of the climb has absolutely no issues. You can see here we're approaching top of climb. You get the correct enunciators, which is altitude to start with, and then it switches over to altitude cruise when you reach your top of climb. So now we're at top of climb, we can pop down to the FMC and you get a top of descent prediction or calculator, which is kind of useful. So we'll go down here, go to our perf page, and it tells us we're 30 miles out. Once we get a little bit closer, what we can do is we can put our final altitudes into the MCP, which we're going to set to 2000 here. It should be roughly right for catching the ILS at Cardiff, because there's no real VNAV on this plane. When you reach the top of descent, we can activate our managed descent mode, and the plane correctly starts its managed descent towards its final altitude. At the bottom of descent, a lot of things happen quite quickly. So obviously we've set our altimeter to the correct one, or we would if I could be bothered, below 5,000 feet. You can see it slowed down to 250 knots. So we're just about at bottom of descent. We're about to overfly our final waypoint. So this doesn't fly you onto the approach, it flies you to the final waypoint, and you then have to vector yourself towards the runway. So we're going to do this now. We're going to switch over to our desired heading mode, and we're going to set that so we start vectoring towards the airport and towards the ILS. We also start applying the flaps here, because when you start doing that at bottom of descent, it will start its deceleration, which will automatically take us towards our approach speed of about 125 knots. So with bottom of descent reached, we can put the ILS frequency of the airport into the FMC, which I'm just going to do now, and then once that is done we will start our turn, start our vectoring towards final as we've flown over the airport, and we're about 13 miles away from it. So this plane for some reason really doesn't like to pick up the localizer. You can vector it the same as you would any other plane, but it really does need some encouragement to pick up the localizer. Eventually we did get it working, but we did kind of fly it manually for a little bit, which is why you're going to hear the autopilot disconnect alarm in a minute, which you can't actually switch off in this plane. So after a long time trying to get it into the right position where it would intercept, the plane does pick up the localizer. So you just put it in approach mode as always, as you're vectoring, to get it to pick up the localizer. And we've also set here the second autopilot, so that is hopefully in an auto land mode. So once we're on the glide path, it will start descending towards the airport. And there's our glide slope annunciator, which will start bringing us down towards the tarmac and hopefully flare an auto land at the end. So here we are on the glide slope, and we've now got our land annunciator because we're at 400 feet. So all being well, this should land on the tarmac. It should flare, back off the throttle, and then land on the tarmac and roll out all by itself. So at flare it does correctly back off the throttle. I've applied the reversers just to force it down and just to make sure it doesn't float. As soon as we touch down, we will apply the brakes, and then we'll roll off the reversers as we're going slow enough to just use the brakes. But you can see here it's rolling out really well, and there we go, a successful auto land in the Hager. So we'll take in a look at the replay and give some final thoughts. So the Hager A380 in 2021, it technically does work. It's a little bit of a pain because you've got those flight plan issues that you have to work around with direct-to, and you've also got those issues on approach where it's really picky about picking up the localizer. But in between, everything else, climb, descent and landing, work fantastically. So if you want to fly an A380 in a sim, this is still probably your only option. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe, and if you liked it, drop me a like. It's much appreciated, and take care, and I'll see you next time.